Guys, welcome to the J. Scott Outdoors podcast. This is going to be a great episode with Jason Phelps of Phelps Game Calls, and this is going to be a four-part series. And we're going to go over everything from the mechanics of how to make a sound out of a diaphragm. We're going to go through how to make a sound out of an external reed, a bugle. And then we're going to get even more advanced. We're going to talk about the actual characteristics of each call and how the calls are made and how the calls are stretched. We're going to talk about the little tricks of the trade of how to make each individual call sound better. And Jason's going to do a lot of demonstrating for us on cow calling, how he likes to bugle, how he likes to chuckle, how he likes to grunt. And so this is going to be a great four-part series. And I know the listeners you guys are going to get a great bit of value out of it. So I'm looking forward to sharing it with you. Before we get to that, I want to thank my sponsors. I want to thank GoHunt.com Insider, and I want to announce that there's a real special promo that GoHunt.com Insider is doing for the J. Scott podcast listeners, and that is it's a 30-day free trial exclusive for the J. Scott Outdoors podcast listeners. All you have to do is go to GoHunt.com/JScott and click on the blue free trial button and go through the steps. It only takes a couple of minutes. You'll be required to provide a credit card, but they will not be charged until after the free 30 days. You can cancel any time within the first 30 days to prevent being charged. If you guys have any questions at all about the free trial at GoHunt, you can go to freetrial@gohunt.com and someone from the GoHunt team will promptly respond. So this is your opportunity. If you've been listening over the last year about me talking about GoHunt.com Insider, this is your chance for a 30-day free trial to go on and check out the Filtering 2.0 system, check out the draw odds, check out how they get their harvest statistics, check out the mapping, check out how they can break down each unit. Check for the local area services. You basically have a free run at checking out the unbelievable resource at GoHunt Insider. So again, go to gohunt.com/JScott, click on the blue free trial button and go through the steps. And it's a free trial, so go check it out. I want to thank GoHunt.com Insider for their sponsorship. They've been the title sponsor of my podcast since the beginning. I would also like to thank Western Hunter and Elk Hunter magazines. They also have a promotion going right now. If you go to westernhunter.net/JScott and you'll be prompted to go to a page. When you get to that page, it'll say enter an email address. If you enter your email address, you'll be entered into the drawing. They're giving away July 15th a $1,500 credit towards Swarovski Optics through another sponsor of the J. Scott Outdoors podcast, The Outdoorsmans. All you have to do is enter your email address. Again, go to westernhunter.net/JScott. Enter your email address you go to the prompt, and one person is going to win a $1,500 credit towards any Swarovski product. I want to thank Western Hunter and Elk Hunter magazines for their support. Also want to thank phonescope.com. If you go to phonescope.com, you get 10% off if you mention the J. Scott Outdoors podcast. Also, if you go to the Outdoorsmans or call the Outdoorsmans at 1-800-291-8065. If you call the Outdoorsmans or you go on their website, use the J. Scott promo code, you're going to get 10% off all products at the Outdoorsmans as well. Also want to thank Utah Hydrographics, and there's a two-tiered system of discount. You can go to Utah Hydrographics, check it all out. You can get they can dip anything in Kuyu Verde camo or virtually any camo pattern out there. And there's substantial discounts by using the J Scott promo code, and also Wilderness Athlete. Proud to have Wilderness Athlete as a sponsor, and if you use the J Scott promo code, you get 10% discount. So, guys, without those sponsors, this podcast wouldn't be possible. I appreciate you guys supporting them. I get feedback from my sponsors every day, how much support you are giving them, and for that, I appreciate it. Also, I love getting feedback every day from the listeners. You can email me at jscottoutdoors@gmail.com. I'm going to be launching several episodes where I'm answering the listeners' questions. I've already done one briefly, and I've got great response from that. So jscottoutdoors@gmail.com. Send me any questions or anybody you want to hear on the podcast. I get multiple emails, Facebook messages, Instagram messages, texts, phone calls every day from listeners, and that's just awesome. I thrive on that. I want to make this podcast the most informative and educational experience that I can. If I don't know the answer to it, I will find someone that does, and we will get to the bottom of it together. I just want to thank all of you guys for just unbelievable support. Thank you so much. Make sure to go to jscottoutdoors.com. That website is under construction right now, but you can kind of see all the different things that Craig Steele at CS Creativity is doing. He's revamping and centralizing everything. So it's basically, you can go to jscottoutdoors.com. You'll be able to click on Instagram, my YouTube channel, my Facebook page, all my different blogs, and of course this podcast. You can listen to the podcast right on the website. You can link out to iTunes. You can link out to Podbean. So it's he's doing a great job, and there'll be more and more content put on there as the days go by. So make sure to check out jscottoutdoors.com. Also, I'm making a transition in Facebook to posting content on the J Scott Outdoors business page. So just go to type in J Scott Outdoors, come like my Facebook page. I'm maxed out on my personal page, and we're moving pretty much all the content over to J Scott Outdoors business page. Guys, again, thanks for your support. I hope you really enjoy this 4-part series with Jason Phelps of Phelps Game Calls.
But now I'll show you kind of, and you should be able to hear the inflection of when I start to add voice into the middle of this clean note. It just adds a little more realistic sound to it, and kind of ties everything together. But you're just basically reversing what you're doing on the cow call. You're adding a little more air volume across it. You're still kind of applying loose pressure, and you're adding pressure as you put air across that reed.
And don't you think you brought up a good point? I mean, when elk calls first came out, and all the packaging, you would hear or read that, you want to go grr, or you want to, and I think that's why you get most people that you hear out in the woods going, and then,
Yep.
then they go into a high pitch. Whereas I totally agree with you on the clean front end, and then into the growly voice is a much more realistic sound, because in essence, I've never thought that the growl at the front end was very realistic.
Yeah.
Most bulls, they kind of hit into their high pitch. Where I'm from, most bulls kind of hit into their high pitch and then, growl and chuckle and do all of that at the end. And I think that's, in my opinion, one real disservice that the original, nothing against these guys, but the original guys thought that, growl at the beginning, and I think that has screwed up a lot of people's elk calling. What do you think?
I agree. And, I'm not going to lie, there for, up until probably 5 years ago, I was that same guy. I would growl at the beginning, and then I'm not going to hide the fact that I'm kind of a nerd at this stuff. And, watching Steve's videos, watching all of the hunting videos, all of the real elk, pulling from my real hunting experience, I'm like, man, I just don't think the video of me making that call and then listening to, to a real bull respond, just it's not right. And so I basically, just through tons of listening to elk, I was like, man, I should probably take that out of the front and put that voice inflection in the middle. And it would probably be hard to say whether it screwed me up ever or not, but trying to be the most accurate caller I can, I just decided to toss that out of the front end. And not, to be honest, it makes calling easier. I don't got to try to growl and then figure out how to get into a clean note. It's just I can start clean, and it's actually easier for me to bugle that way.
Well, and that was something that I was going to say too, is it actually, I think, is pretty hard to learn how to do that front growl. Which, can you kind of demonstrate for me kind of the old style, what we were taught, 20 years ago to sound like, just so if people don't know, can you kind of give me the growl to high pitch kind of sound that we were taught?
Yeah, I'll do my best, and hopefully I don't resort back to how I usually call, but I'll try to get that growl at the beginning, and then how one of my old bugles used to sound.
Yeah. Okay, and then conversely, do the other side where you do high and then throw in kind of the growl, and people will automatically see that it's a much more realistic sound. Yeah, I mean that's perfect example of, if you're out there learning how to bugle, and maybe Jason can demonstrate, can you go carry your high pitch on the beginning? Let's hear you carry it like as long as you can possibly carry it, and then maybe even not even drop off into your growl, just maybe just pull it off, and just, even if it's fluty. I'm curious if people, I think, would start out and be able to just really have that clean high pitch and carry it, then they can bring it back and add voice inflection. But let me hear you just a real high pitch bugle all the way to the end and carry it, obnoxiously long.
Okay.
Yeah. I mean, would you agree that if people would learn to hit that high note, hold the high note, it's a lot easier then to learn to come off of it, add voice inflection, add a little growl, and it sounds very realistic.
It is. If somebody can comfortably hold that high note and not wave back and forth, everything else should be easy. Besides a lip ball, once you can do that, everything else should be super easy to add back into it, and you can build on that clean high note. Exactly.
For sure.
And
with you,
oh, go ahead.
Go ahead.
I was gonna say, and not to mention, we're just talking about the mechanics of calling. Regardless of my opinion on the effectiveness of that call out in the elk hunting woods, I think that high pitch is way more effective than some of that growling stuff that we do, at the beginning or the end or wherever you put it. I think that, in my opinion and experience, that high note gets the response, carries better, and typically gets you, better reactions.
Okay, Jason, while you have your bugle tube out and your call that you like to bugle with, I'd like for you to go into a little bit more advanced sounds, and let's hear some of that Roosevelt chuckling, which I think in my mind adds all the realism in the world, and makes, in my mind, it makes a good caller a great caller. It makes a caller in the woods that sounds like someone that doesn't sound like an elk to someone that, sounds like an elk. Walk me through some of your chuckling and some of the different little, tricks with your bugle that you use on an everyday basis.
Okay. Yeah, and I'm not going to try to get in, a lot of people have got into the sounds and what they mean. I make it easy on myself, and my strategy is just basically mimic, and I do believe there's a difference whether we call one chuckles, one grunts, but they are kind of a different sound. So a typical chuckle, in my opinion, is more of a knock. It doesn't have that deep, thumpy elk tone to it, but it's more of a kind of almost like an ape-like sound. So to add a chuckle onto the call, it's really about cadence, and it's really about getting the inhale and exhale. That's the one downfall to a lot of these external bugle calls, is that you can't inhale back through the call. So you end up getting a one-dimensional, chuckle or grunt. which isn't always needed, but it's just trying to add all this realism and be able to make every sound, that the elk that I'm trying to call and make. So here's what a typical bugle would sound like with a chuckle on the end. It's a little more rapid cadence. It's a little bit faster. Now I'm going to do the same exact bugle, but with a grunt on the end. And this is my typical style, is the typically grunt. And I'm really a temperamental caller. I'm trying to read the scenario, kind of take the temperature of that bull. And in my opinion, once I can get to the level where I can grunt, it's kind of turning the heat up. But this is what a grunt. It's a lot deeper. It's more of an elk noise. Of course, a chuckle is because they they do it too, but it's got a little more tone to it. So here's what a deep grunt sounds like. A little slower cadence, a little deeper, a little bit more drawn out, and it's just my style. I don't know why I developed it or where. On my second grunt's always longer than my first one. The first one's kind of like a little short or 3/4 grunt, and then I kind of slowly step down in intensity and length, and you kind of you're not running it up to zero, but you're kind of slowly making them shorter and less aggressive and less volume towards the end. Um,
What tube is that you're using? Because I believe you make your own tubes as well.
Yeah, it's my locatable. I've got a new version that I hope to have out here in the next few months, and I make no lies. I don't. Everything's transparent. They are basically, I would buy bats in the quantities of 100 dozen at a time. So I have 1,200, and then I just basically modify them to my exact liking. I've played around with them enough, tried different end diameters, different ways to treat it, different styles of tape, rubber dampening compounds. And so I just, basically came up with a style that provided the right amount of back pressure for me. And so, yeah, it is my tube that we sell on the website there. But, I'm not going to lie, it's a modified wiffle bat to my specifications, I guess.
Yeah, but when you say modified, it's like you've messed around with it. You've probably gone through 100 bats just to get it all right and get it, get the exact texture and length
Yeah.
and cuts and, sound, get it to sound that way. So
Yeah.
it's, you make it sound simple, but I guarantee you just go buy a wiffle ball bat, it ain't gonna be the same.
No, no. And I always joke with my wife. She sometimes gets a wild hair to go out and help me clean up my garage. And I have a boneyard of bats that I've just, a big, huge bin. And she tries to throw. I was like, do not throw those away.
They're still a work in
yeah. And
progress.
there's research in there that if I try to figure out, what I did at one time or other things that I've tried, I want to go back. But you know, on top of the chuckling and grunting, one of the, and I've always kind of joked, for where I hunt, a lot of bulls don't lip ball. Now, I know just from watching videos and trying to be a student of all elk, you guys get a lot of bulls that do basically, what we call lip ball, or they've got that sputter in their bugle from the start. And you may be able to tell me better on percentage wise, how many bulls do it, but it seems to be a high percentage that do a lip ball.
Well, I think for me, the more that they get into the rut and the more that they really get cranked up, the more that they really get lip balling. I think it's just they're frothing at the mouth and they're so worked up that, it's almost like if you watch two guys fight, they all of a sudden, their voice changes and they just are, so worked up that that sometimes their voice is all hoarse and frothy and,
Yep.
they in essence, they can't really control their vocal cords and they just go crazy. I remember the first time that Steve Chappell um, lip balled for me, I just shook my head and said, "Man, that's exactly what they sound like."
Yep.
Um, Give us a demonstration of that, and then maybe tell us how you're doing that.
Okay. I typically hold a little bit tighter. Some guys, have a little bit of looser lip ball, but basically we're still running the call the same. You're just sputtering your lips. If you put your lips as tight as together as you can, and I'm going to do it without the call, and basically force the air through it fast enough to sputter your lips. we're basically spitting into the tube. And so I'll do the same thing without a reed into the tube. And really, what you're doing is you're requiring that tube to resonate in the lip ball. Yeah, you're going to sputter your lips, so the call is going to be ungulate back and forth. But yeah, you're just basically playing the same call, but sputtering your lips in a tight enough fashion to force the air through. And then the hardest part for me when I was learning was the transition in and out of it without just killing the call. Yeah, so here's a typical full lip ball. I always add it in early into the call and then transition out. Some guys will start it from the very beginning. I'm just more comfortable kind of winding my way into it and then carrying on. It just seems to activate easier. And then some guys add it at the very end. But here's one more time my typical lip ball.
You know, one thing that I just observed in that last chuckle that I think needs to be pointed out is, and maybe you can do it again. In that chuckle, you actually are chuckling with a high pitch, meaning you're throwing voice inflection into it, but maybe you could demonstrate it again and people could listen. And if the listener could actually catch what he's doing here, where you hear people chuckle and they don't hit that a quarter second high pitch. Do you know what I'm saying, Jason?
Yeah, and that's I don't know if we didn't catch it earlier. Like on my chuckle, I don't add that kind of what you're alluding to now. And like I said, we can call it whatever we want, and it might just be a naming convention thing. But I've always kind of assumed that the chuckle was without that high pitch, and then my grunts, I kind of add in more of that thump with the high note that you're talking about. But I'll do them.
Yeah.
I'll do the one with the high note again, which is what I call a grunt, and then I'll do a chuckle right after that. I'll do a 1 or 2 second pause and then chuckle. Now here's a chuckle.
Gotcha there. So what you're saying is the chuckle is a more ape-like, just a
Yeah.
And the grunt is more of that sharp, deep,
Yeah.
high pitch, low pitch, high pitch, low pitch.
Yeah.
Both are very, very realistic, but I would say being able to grunt what you call grunt and have that high to low, if you can master that, that is really, really elky. I think a lot of people have a little bit of trouble getting that high pitch in their chuckle or in their grunt, what you call a grunt.
Yeah, and a lot of the guys that I get emails or messages or texts from, that I'm not gonna lie, that's probably the number one question. How do you do that? How they've either listened to me call on a hunt or at a seminar, and I get home and it's like, well, how did you grunt? My grunts, and a lot of these guys they're great callers, they're great high pitch callers, but trying to tie that cadence, the inhale, the exhale, and everything together to get that grunt, is tough for some guys. But like you had just said, I think, and that's why I tried to. I worked on that a lot. Is just I think it adds a ton of realism, and in the heat of the moment, I think it adds some of that aggression to my calling.
Well, and it adds realism.
Yep.
So, you guys that hunt a lot of Rosies, Roosevelts, for people out there that don't know, Roosevelts are known for doing a lot of chuckling, and some Roosevelts are known for basically just chuckling. And jump in where you want, Jason, but I know some guys that live in your neck of the woods, and they're all great chucklers and what you would call grunters, great chucklers.
Yep.
Is that because you're Roosevelts? Because you hear that a lot, and so you just by nature you want to mimic that those sounds?
Yeah, I mean that's we don't really we don't we view as a chuckle or a grunt, like you said, as bugling. They're all tied together. And it wasn't until I kind of got into competition calling and listened to some of the judges' critiques that you chuckle or grunt too much. I was like, well, that's all, to me, it's all the same. And I may even be low, but I would venture to guess that 85 to 90% of every elk interaction I've had here, with Roosevelts, Coastal Roosevelts, have chuckled or grunted. In some form or fashion, very rarely. And if you don't get it one time, you'll get it on the very next bugle. It's very rarely that you run into a bull that just will not grunt or chuckle somewhere during his routine or the call in.
But would you agree with your interaction with Roosevelt's compared to Rocky Mountain elk, that they do tend to chuckle a lot more?
Yeah, yeah, correct. I mean, yeah, I don't even want to throw a number at Rocky Mountain bulls. I mean, you do get a lot of them that will chuckle or grunt at you, but it's not near the magnitude of the coastal Roosevelt. Yeah, they,
For sure.
yeah. And,
Uh,
oh, go ahead.
Go ahead.
I was gonna say I don't know. I don't necessarily know the reason. The terrain's different and stuff. It might just be a species thing. That's kind of ingrained in them. But yeah, for some reason, it's a lopsided.
Yeah. Well, it's pretty neat, and like Casey Brooks and some of those guys like yourself, that live up there in that country and have heard a lot of Roosevelts, and quite honestly, guys that can really chuckle and can really grunt, I think have a much better chance when they start hunting Rocky Mountain elk. I think sound a lot more realistic. Um, my question to you would be when you hear people calling or you get emails and people say, "Hey, how do I sound?" or you're out in the woods and you hear, what is the dead giveaway for a hunter's bugle?
Air, if they're close enough, or I've got a good enough ear to be able to hear them, there's not a lot of wind. I can typically hear like air leaking. You know what I mean? You get that blow by, and I'm like, that's not a clean enough note. Or if a lot of these guys that's on a diaphragm. If guys are using any of the externals on the chuckle, you can, like we're talking chuckle or grunt or the ending. I can almost always tell.
Because it's fluty and high pitch and
Yeah,
it's real fluty
yeah,
sounding.
you just can't end it the same way that a normal bull will. And I work on that transition all the time out of my bugle. As goofy as it sounds, but I, trying to transition out and kind of play with the air volume and the sound that I'm right at the end of my bugle. A lot of guys will just cut the call off, or they'll do some little wavy ending. And so if you pay enough attention to that, a lot of times, and then there are good callers that can trick me. My good buddy Corey Miller, who runs Triple X Archery in Rainier, Oregon, we used to hunt the same general area when I was growing up, and we've called each other in multiple times. But he's a very very good elk caller that you can get fooled by very easily. Back before we knew each other, we would call each other in quite a bit. And then I'm not gonna lie, there's times where I absolutely refuse to go after an elk, and we've called them in, and it's been a real elk. In 2013, we ended up calling a bull, and that I absolutely refused to get called in by somebody, and within 5 minutes we had him in our lap at 23 yards.
Yeah, I hate it when that happens because you're just sure it's a hunter, and then all of a sudden it's a real elk, and you're like, well,
Yep.
I don't know as much as I think I know, you know?
Yep, yep. And then my hunting partner, or one of the guys I hunt with a lot for elk. I'm pretty fortunate. A lot of my hunting partners are good elk callers, but guys like Charlie Smith, if now that I've hunted with him enough, I know that it's his bugle, but he would fool 99.9% of the guys all the time, every time. His chuckles are just good enough. His transitions are good enough. And once you get 50 yards away from him in the timber and you start bouncing sound off of trees and brush, you can't tell. So it's just, I think transitions and endings is the dead giveaway, just because I've heard so many real elk that haven't sounded good anywhere else.
Jason, you doing all right?
Yeah, yeah, we're good. My glass of water is getting low, but I'm good right now.
Okay. We're at 60 minutes now, so I'm probably going to break this into a two-part series. So if you don't mind, if we can go for another 30 minutes or
Yeah,
so, we'll just go and talk about some different stuff. I want you to do the external read and stuff too.
yeah,
So, you're all right time-wise?
yeah, we're good. I've got another hour free for sure. So
Okay, sounds good. All right, Jason, we've talked about the mechanics of making a cow sound. We've talked about the mechanics of a bugle. You've talked about grunts and chuckles. Another thing that you do very, very well, and you make a great external read call or open read call. I would like you to walk me through and the listeners how they would get this external read. Do you call it external or open read?
Yeah, oh, both. I interchangeably, externals, open.
Okay.
Yep,
And basically you can describe it, but it's a mylar reed of some sort on a plastic soundboard, and you've either got plastic or synthetic barrel or a wood barrel, depending on what call it is.
yep.
Can you walk through the point A to point B on those?
Yeah, for sure. I'm gonna start off with just a little side note. I use these a lot growing up because they're easier to learn. People that can't run diaphragms or just anybody should have them in their pocket. They're one of the downfalls to an open reed call is sticking at the most inopportune time when they get, whether people are drinking sugary drinks throughout the hunt, eating a candy bar, a bag of Skittles, and then you go right to blowing on the external. You've now got sugars trapped underneath the mylar reed, in between the plastic, and a lot of times you'll get these things to seize up. One thing, as long as you're not allergic, one tip is to dry it very thoroughly, clean it with water, and you can spray some Pam cooking spray on a paper towel and wipe the reed below against all the surfaces, and then wipe it back off as clean as you can. That will sometimes help prevent these things from sticking, and preventing that. It seems like they always stuck at the most inopportune time. Um,
Yeah, I know it's one of those things you've called for hours and hours and hours, and then all of a sudden you get a bull to answer, and he's coming, and the dang call
Yep.
sticks.
Probably because you're sweating a little more at that time, or you've made a quick run, and they always seem. So that's my one tip is to use Pam cooking spray, any cooking spray there to wipe that down. It will help, but they're very versatile. On my calls, I use a wood barrel primarily. We've played around with a little bit of acrylic. The one thing, I'm not going to dog acrylic or plastic call makers. Wood has in my opinion, a rich tone. It kind of grabs onto that sound, so to speak, and mellows it down and richens it up. So I've got two different calls here, but we'll first kind of walk through how I use them. Um, I use them all the time throughout the hunt. They're a little bit, sometimes I'll locate with them if I'm trying to locate with a cow call. But my calls include a green band, which basically just prevent damage to the reed, or if you press down on them, you can actually change the effective length of that reed a little bit. So I would say about a half inch up the tone board, I wrap my top teeth I wrap my top lip around my teeth as tight as I can. I have a little more control with my lip. I can also call with my teeth. I just can't feel as well, and I don't have quite as much control over the call. So by wrapping tight, and I would say if you're a new user, wrap them tight enough you almost cut the call off and don't allow any sound. And then you've got two options. You can either drop your bottom jaw, which relieves pressure, or a lot of the better callers that have smoother transitions and breakovers will kind of roll into the call and drop your bottom jaw at the same time. So by starting about a half inch in, and this is one thing you may want to play with, if you're too high, put more of the call into your mouth, and if you're too low when you first start, take some of the tone board out of your mouth. So pull the
And
call
you're
out.
talking about pitch. If your pitch is too high or your pitch is
Yeah,
too low, you need to move it in and find the sweet spot.
yeah. So I'll do a really high call, for example, which I would want to move in or put the call more in my mouth. So that's really high. Or you can go the conversely. If I put too much of the call and too much of the reed in my mouth, it'll start without that high note. So that's really deep. You want to kind of find the balance. So if you get in the middle and then get the breakover, so you play with that, and effectively what you're doing is wherever your lip touches that call, your top lip's applying pressure. And that's another thing. I blow my calls with the mylar reed up. Some guys love to blow with it down. I just don't have as much control, but it's really a user preference. Um,
Wouldn't you say like 90% of the people blow with the mylar up?
yeah, I would say 90, but there's the other 10 percenters. I've heard some of them that are really good with it down. So, kind of find your own. Most guys just have more control with the mylar reed up. And so how this call is actually working is wherever you stop or pinch that call down with your upper lip or teeth or whatever you're using, you're allowing that mylar, it vibrates very, very quickly. Well, by shortening it up, you get a higher pitch. As you roll into it or decrease pressure, you're basically effectively lengthening that, and that's how you get the breakover. So, I would say, and there are good callers that do it both ways. I would say your better, more realistic external callers roll into the call instead of drop their bottom jaw. So this is a typical call where you roll in, and then I'll show you when you drop off, and there may not be a difference. I basically have to cut a little bit of air off when I start to drop my bottom jaw, or the call, I'll lose the call and it'll get too deep. So that's why I think you can get a little more whiny and hold on to that call and have more control if you roll into it, because you're never really letting that pressure. You're just kind of walking up the tone board. Whereas if you're letting off pressure, there's no way to kind of hold on to that tone.
Okay, and would you agree that the guys that probably blow this call the best are not sliding the call in and out in their mouth? They're keeping it more at a fixed rate using their lip pressure once they find that sweet spot?
Yep. Yeah. I mean, not necessarily. I say more of rolling. You watch them, they almost tip the barrel up. If
Yeah.
it's not, they're keeping in the same spot by rotating that barrel up. You're kind of taking that tone board um, off of your off of your top lip, and making that breakover. And then I also wanted to show, I have two calls here, exact same tone board, exact same cut of the reed, and I want to kind of show why I like wood. If somebody messages me and says I want a high pitch call, I've got an Australian burl, which is probably twice as hard as my normal easy estrus, and I'm just going to show you the compare and contrast, just the sound difference that the barrel makes. So first, I will do the call I've been using, which is just my normal easy estrus off the website. Versus here's an Australian burl, which is probably twice as dense as that call. It just, same thing with acrylic. That denser wood just kind of sucks up some of the sound, makes it a little bit harsher and a little higher pitched. So that's one of the beauties of working with wood, is just by changing the wood or the species, I can effectively change the call with the exact same tune on the tone board.
When that wood, where I live is really, really dry, where you live is wet. When the wood gets wet, does it change the sound?
It should, if I do my job right, it shouldn't. The easy estrus we use is an epoxy impregnated wood, so we still get the sound quality. But I have one of the very first calls I made out of the laminate, hanging off my front porch still, and the lanyard's about ready to rot through, but the call itself, wood wise, still looks really good, and actually hasn't even split from all the drying and getting wet. And so some of these things should be locked up pretty tight if I finish them correctly. But we have had some calls, that'll get wet and split, and we'll take care of you if that happens. But hopefully, we shouldn't get a whole lot of swelling or change in that barrel.
Let's hear with that external call. Let's hear some of your advanced calling and some of the sounds that that you can make. One of the things I like about an external reed call is you can get really, really nasally, and you can make a wide variety of sounds. So let's hear some of those.
Yeah. So in my everyday, or my during hunting season, one of the main cow calls I use over a normal mew, or is an estrus whine. It's that time of year. I'm really trying to paint a picture that I'm a cow in heat or approaching heat, and so I use an estrus whine a lot, which is you can do it on a diaphragm easy, but I really love doing it on this external. You get, like you had mentioned, you get that nasally, whiny, needy sound. You can draw it out, and everybody says that I've never heard an elk do that, and very few, and you got to be there at the right time. But just from my experience, that sound alone is very, very effective. It's just that needy, whiny, pleading sound. Um, and then I use a lot of calf talk. That's about as crazy as I get on my external. I know guys like you and Steve are, probably, for sure more talented on externals than I am. Do a little bit more with it. But I basically stick to my normal muse and then that estrus whine. And it does calf talk fairly well when you find the right spot on the tone board. And here's my typical calf, just real short. But, typically I would say 95% of the calling I do on my external is either a loud locator mew or an estrus whine.
Let's hear your loud locator mew.
It's a little, I try to emphasize and hold on to that end and just try to get it as loud as possible, trying to get a bull to respond. And I'm not going to lie, 90, and I know we hunt completely different areas and different strategies. 95% of the time I am locating with a bugle tube and trying to hit that high pitch locator. But there are times and instances where it's more just, gut feeling. We'll use that call to locate, or a loud diaphragm cow call to locate with, and we've had some decent success with it. Or if we think we maybe heard some cows chirping, we may respond with that rather than going right into a bugle.
Sure, just depending on what the situation dictates. Yep. It always interests me a couple things: the width of the mylar and the thickness of the mylar, and have you played around with multiple mylars, and why are this is like 4,000 questions in one. As a tinkerer, have you messed with all sorts of mylars, all thicknesses and all widths?
I have.
And what have you found?
I have. I've played with 10 thousandths natural, 14 thousandths. I've tried some 17 thousandths green, 10 thousandths black, clear. If there was a difference, and it was so in the same thicknesses. In my opinion, if the thickness is the same, the sound may be slightly different, but it wasn't enough to my ear to mess with it. Now, as you get thicker, you basically, we had talked earlier about you're vibrating a weight. So a thicker mylar typically is harder to activate and to get vibrating once you start. Which also requires a little more air. So if I have the same exact cut, but a thicker mylar, say a 10 thousandths worth of 14 thousandths, it's going to be a little bit louder of a call. Now, on the same exact tone board, they should sound the same. Now say we stay with a 10 thousandths piece of mylar on two different reeds, but say one's a really skinny reed like I run on 90% of my cow calls versus say a flared wider reed. You're still adding weight, but you're adding weight but you're still going to get an easy activation, but then that call is going to be deeper because as you rock forward or as you allow that thing to activate, you're vibrating more weight. So it will be slightly louder. It'll still activate easy, but give you that deeper tone. And I've played with double reeds, and I'm not going to give away any trade secrets here at all. I'm not scared to give it, but I always thought with the sticking issue, I wanted one reed out at the end, but I thought, well, what if I put a short reed underneath that just barely comes out the ledge? Would that help almost like springboard effect? Almost be like a spring to help that reed back up. And we played around with that a lot, and it was going to require a change to some tooling and a mold, and we eventually abandoned that, and it made it really hard to assemble calls because that 5/8 was set up for
Jack, what time is it?
Bull killing time!
What time is it?
Bull killing time!
I didn't hear you the first two times. What time is it?
It's bull killing time till the sun goes down!
Awesome. All right, let's go.